a copywriter, implying it was beneath him, or perhaps more accurately, beneath them. The tension was palpable, and despite my efforts to steer the conversation towards common interests, the evening ended with my parents flatly stating that they disapproved of our relationship. It was heartbreaking, but Stephen held my hand through it all, reminding me that our happiness was what truly mattered. After college, my relationship with my parents reached a breaking point when Stephen proposed and I accepted. They saw it as a final act of defiance against their vision for my life. In response, they cut me off financially and emotionally, which was incredibly painful but also freeing in a way I hadn't anticipated. It hurt to lose my family, but I gained a new life with someone who loved and understood me. We married in a small, intimate ceremony filled with genuine moments and laughter, surrounded by close friends and the family Stephen and I had built together. I started working as a 3D designer, and though it was challenging at times, Stephen's unwavering support made all the difference. Years passed, and life settled into a comfortable rhythm until I discovered I was pregnant. The news of our expecting a child seemed to shift something in my parents. Perhaps it was the thought of a grandchild or the realization of how much time had passed. Whatever the reason, they reached out, wanting to mend fences. At first, I was wary. Their sudden interest after years of silence felt conditional and possibly superficial, tied to the continuation of their lineage rather than genuine remorse or love. But Stephen encouraged me to at least hear them out, suggesting that people can change and it might be worth exploring if a reconciliation could benefit our growing family. With cautious optimism, I agreed to meet with them. The reunion was awkward at first, with my parents awkwardly trying to bridge the gap years of estrangement had created. They expressed regret for their past actions and a desire to be part of our lives again. I listened, heart-guarded but open to the possibility of a new chapter. The journey of rebuilding our relationship is ongoing, with many conversations about boundaries, respect, and understanding. It's not easy to let go of the past hurts, but seeing my parents make an effort to connect with their grandchild and respect my choices gives me hope. As we navigate this complex terrain, I remain hopeful but cautious, cherishing the family Stephen and I have created while tentatively opening the door to the one I thought I'd lost. Why did I choose to become a copywriter despite the myriad of esteemed professions available? My father hardly even acknowledged Stephen D's existence, only speaking to me directly and making it crystal clear that he disapproved of him. My parents remained unmoved by the fact that Stephen treated me better than any of the affluent suitors they preferred, convinced he was merely after our wealth and status. When I defended him, highlighting his scholarship and diligent work ethic, my father waved me off, stating dismissively, "Oh honey, don't be naive. Boys like him are always scheming." Despite my parents' disapproval, Stephen and I continued our relationship throughout college, supporting each other through countless late-night study sessions, sharing in each other's successes, and dreaming together about the future. With Stephen, I felt free to be myself and follow my own path, not the one preordained by my parents. After graduation, Stephen proposed during a simple weekend camping trip far from the extravagant gesture my parents would have expected. As we sat beside the campfire under a star-filled sky, he said, "I know I can't offer you the luxurious life you grew up with, but I promise to love and support you in all you do. Will you marry me?" I immediately said yes, without a moment's hesitation. The news of our engagement, however, caused uproar when I told my parents. My mother cried, lamenting that I was throwing my life away, while my father, visibly angered, ranted about the grave mistake I was making. They called me foolish and short-sighted, pleading for me to consider the future and the lifestyle I was accustomed to, especially for any future children. But no matter how much I tried to explain that Stephen and I had discussed our plans and were ready to face any challenges, they wouldn't listen. To them, marrying Stephen equated to choosing a life of hardship and poverty. When I refused to call off the engagement, they issued an ultimatum: end things with Stephen or lose all financial support, no trust fund, no inheritance, nothing. If you're so set on living like a commoner, then you can do it without our money, my father declared. Their reaction was a shock, though not entirely unexpected. In that moment, I realized that their love and support had always been conditional. As long as I complied with their expectations and fit into their narrow definition of success, I was their daughter. The moment I chose my own path, they were ready to disown me. I chose Steven. We married in a modest ceremony attended only by a few close friends. It was nothing like the grandiose society wedding my parents had envisioned, but it was perfect in its simplicity and sincerity. My sister, Aurora, sided with our parents and did not attend the wedding. The day after, I received a cold, formal letter from my parent lawyer informing me that I had been written out of the will and that Aurora was now the sole beneficiary. It also stated I was no longer welcome at the family home and that any attempts to contact them would be handled legally. It hurt more than I could have imagined, not because of the money, as Steven and I were managing just fine, but because my own family chose their outdated values and social standing over my happiness. The parents I thought loved me unconditionally had discarded me because I didn't fit their perfect mold. For 3 years, we had no contact. I tried reaching out initially, leaving voicemails on holidays and birthdays, but my efforts at reconciliation were ignored. Eventually, I stopped trying. During that time, Steven and I built our life together. I worked as a 3D designer for a small advertising agency, and Steven taught English at a local high school. We bought a cozy house in a humble neighborhood, adopted a rescued dog named Max, and found genuine happiness in our simple, love-filled life. Growing up, we never had the luxury of extravagant vacations or designer outfits. Our family had to be mindful about our finances, but we were rich in love and respect for each other, which I valued far more than material wealth. For the first time in my life, I was living genuinely, chasing my own aspirations rather than conforming to someone else's expectations. 3 years into our marriage, Steven and I discovered we were expecting. We were thrilled. While we hadn't been actively trying, the idea of starting a family was something we both cherished. We chose to keep the news private until after the first trimester for safety's sake. About a week after we began sharing our joyful news with friends, I received an unexpected text from Aurora. It was the first time she had reached out in 3 years. The message was brief. Mom and Dad heard about the baby. They want to talk. Call them. I was puzzled. How had my parents learned of my pregnancy? I hadn't shared it with any family members, and as far as I knew, there were no common friends who might have told them. After discussing it with Steven, I hesitantly decided to call them, hoping perhaps the prospect of becoming grandparents had mellowed their hearts. When I rang, my mother picked up quickly. The conversation was stilted and uncomfortable. She dominated the dialogue, while in the background, I could hear my father's heavy breathing and occasional murmurs of agreement. She congratulated me on my pregnancy, but then, without any preamble or apology for their past behavior, she began discussing how they wanted to be involved in their grandchild's life. Then, almost abruptly, she started listing off expensive gifts they planned to send: a top-of-the-line stroller, a custom-made crib, designer baby clothes, even a new car. The total cost of these items would easily surpass $20,010. It felt more like an attempt to buy their way back into my life rather than a genuine gesture of reconciliation. When I tried to graciously decline, suggesting that Steven and I had begun preparing for the baby ourselves, my mother became irritated. "Don't be ridiculous," she snapped. "You can't possibly provide for this child the way we can. We're just trying to help. Don't let your pride get in the way of giving your baby the best start in life." The call ended with her stating that they would send the gifts regardless and expected to be involved in their grandchild's upbringing. She never once asked about my well-being, how the pregnancy was progressing, or how Steven was doing. It was all about the gifts and fulfilling their own expectations. After I hung up, Steven was incensed by the conversation. He felt that my parents were attempting to undermine our capabilities, trying to demonstrate that they could offer something we couldn't. "They're trying to buy their way into our lives," he argued, pacing around our modest living room. "And once we accept these gifts, they'll use it as leverage to dictate how we raise our child." I knew Steven was right, but a small part of me still clung to the hope that this might just be a clumsy attempt by my parents to mend our relationship. Maybe they've changed, I mused aloud, though I was skeptical myself. Maybe becoming grandparents has made them realize what's truly important. Steven looked at me, his expression serious. "Do you really believe that? Or are you just hoping it's true because you miss them?" His question struck a chord. I did miss my family, the good times, the holiday celebrations, the inside jokes. Yet, I couldn't erase the memory of their stringent expectations and how quickly they had dismissed me when I chose a path different from the one they had envisioned. Stephen assured me he would support whatever decision I made, but I could tell he was wary of accepting any help from my parents. The dilemma was real, whether to give my parents a chance to make amends or protect the simple, authentic life we had built for ourselves from their influence. Stephen is genuinely concerned that if we let them in, my parents will try to control our lives and our child's upbringing. He keeps reminding me that we've been managing perfectly fine on our own. We don't need their wealth or their validation. Meanwhile, Aurora, my sister, has been incessantly messaging me, swinging between making me feel guilty for keeping a grudge and excitedly talking about becoming an aunt. She doesn't seem to grasp my hesitation to accept our parent offer. They're trying to make things right, she insists. Why can't you just let go of the past? But it's not that straightforward. The past has profoundly shaped who I am and the life I've chosen. I called my mother to explain that while we appreciated their gesture, we were uncomfortable accepting such lavish gifts. I kept the conversation polite and suggested that if they truly wanted to be part of our child's life, we could start with something simple, like a dinner to discuss things further. My mother didn't take it well. She accused me of being ungrateful and stubborn, warning that I would regret this decision as our child would miss out on the advantages they could provide. I held firm, explaining that Stephen and I were fully capable of supporting our child and that we were looking for a relationship, not material things. The call ended abruptly with her hanging up on me. I thought that would be the end of it, but I was mistaken. A few days later, a delivery truck unloaded all the items my mother had mentioned: the stroller, the crib, designer baby clothes, and even the keys to a new car parked on our street. There was a note: for our grandchild. We won't let your stubbornness deprive them of the best. Stephen and I were shocked. We felt our boundaries had been completely disregarded. We stored everything in the garage temporarily while we figured out what to do next. Stephen was adamant about sending it all back immediately, but I hesitated. The situation escalated the following day when Aurora showed up, thrilled about the baby and the gifts. She acted as if no rift had ever occurred between us. Isn't it wonderful? She gushed. Mom and Dad are so excited to be grandparents. They just want to help. I tried to explain our stance to her, but she couldn't understand our perspective. Why are you being so difficult? She asked. Most people would be thrilled to receive such generous gifts. You're acting like Mom and Dad are villains. Our conversation quickly soured into an argument. Aurora accused me of being selfish and clinging to past grievances. They're trying to make amends, she insisted. Why can't you just accept their love and move on? I finally lost my temper. Love? I retorted. Is that what you call ignoring me for 3 years and then trying to buy their way back into my life? That's not love, Aurora. That's control. Aurora stormed out, warning me that I was pushing our parents away for good, and it would be my fault if our child grew up without grandparents. To make matters worse, our extended family has caught wind of the situation. I've received numerous calls and messages from aunts, uncles, and cousins, all urging me to reconcile with my parents. They're your parents, Aunt Sharon said during one particularly challenging call. Of course, they want to spoil their grandchild. Why are you fighting this so hard? I've tried to explain the years of silence and how their current actions feel less like a genuine attempt at reconciliation and more like a bid to buy their way back into our lives. However, navigating these conversations remains immensely difficult. It's incredibly challenging to convey to others the complexity of our situation, especially to those who haven't lived through similar experiences. Stephen has been my steadfast supporter throughout this ordeal, constantly reminding me that we don't need financial assistance from my parents. We're doing fine on our own, he reassures me. Our child will have everything they need: love, support, and parents who adore them. Now at 17 weeks pregnant, instead of reveling in the joy of my pregnancy, I find myself engulfed in stress and conflict. The unopened gifts from my parents are still piled up in our garage, a constant reminder of the unresolved tensions and the decisions that loom over us. Stephen suggests we donate everything to a local women's shelter, but taking that step feels spinal, like we're shutting the door on any future reconciliation with my parents. Meanwhile, Aurora continues to send me pictures of baby clothes and nursery designs, pretending as if everything is normal. My parents haven't reached out since they sent the gifts, but I feel the expectant silence pressing down on us. Family members keep calling and messaging, adding to the pressure as my pregnancy progresses. We know a decision must be made soon. We can't keep those gifts in the garage indefinitely, and we need to prepare for our baby's arrival. Each time I think I've settled on a decision, doubt creeps back in. Stephen and I have discussed seeking the help of a family counselor. Perhaps an external perspective could guide us toward a solution we haven't yet considered. For now, we're taking things one day at a time, trying to focus on the positive aspects of my pregnancy and our life together. Yet, the family drama is an ever-present shadow in the background. I hope that whatever decision we make will be the best one for our child. 3 months have passed since my last post, and I wanted to share the resolution of our situation. A lot has happened, and after weeks of inner turmoil, Stephen and I made some tough but necessary decisions. We decided to consult a family counselor, which helped us enormously. The counselor worked with us to explore our feelings and priorities, ultimately helping us see that maintaining our autonomy was crucial for our family's well-being. With heavy hearts but clear minds, we decided to donate the gifts to the women's shelter. It was a difficult decision, but it felt right, reinforcing our independence and the values we want to instill in our child. We informed my parents of our decision in a calm and respectful manner. Surprisingly, this act of setting clear boundaries has slowly started to change the dynamics. My parents began to reach out more thoughtfully, and conversations have become less about what they think we need and more about genuine interest in our lives. We're cautiously optimistic about rebuilding some form of relationship with them. As for Aurora, it took some time, but she's starting to understand our perspective. We're not fully reconciled, but there's a newfound respect for our choices. Navigating this path wasn't easy, but Stephen and I feel confident that we've made the right choice for our family. We're now focusing on preparing for our new arrival, surrounded by love and support, with a little more peace of mind. Stephen and I sought the guidance of a family counselor, attending several sessions together and individually to navigate our feelings about the ongoing issues with my parents. These sessions were instrumental in helping us understand our priorities and establish healthy boundaries, which proved essential as tensions within my family escalated. The situation reached a new level of stress when my parents began showing up at our house unannounced, persistently knocking on our door for hours, pleading for a conversation. This was especially taxing as my pregnancy advanced, bringing with it the usual physical strains. Meanwhile, Aurora intensified her guilt-tripping tactics, bombarding me with daily messages and even threatening to sever ties with me if I refused to mend things with our parents. The tipping point came when I was about 29 weeks pregnant. My parents caused a commotion at my workplace, demanding to see me and asserting their rights as grandparents, which led to an embarrassing scene in the lobby. My colleagues were put on edge, and my boss was forced to intervene, threatening to call the police. This incident was a stark revelation that my parents hadn't changed. They were still intent on controlling my life, blatantly disregarding my wishes. After thorough discussions with Stephen and our counselor, we made the painful but necessary decision to cut all contact with my parents and Aurora. We formalized this by sending a cease and desist letter through a lawyer, clearly stating that any further contact would be considered harassment. We also donated all the baby gifts to a local women's shelter, a suggestion Stephen had made earlier. Letting go of these items was difficult, but doing so felt correct. We didn't want our child's life to begin with any strings attached. The day after the letter was dispatched, I blocked my parents and Aurora on all communication platforms. It was one of the toughest actions I've ever taken, but also one of the most freeing. The constant stress and anxiety I had been feeling began to dissipate almost immediately. Our daughter Ella was born 2 months ago. Although her birth was challenging and there were moments I missed having my mother's support, Stephen was an incredible pillar of strength, and we managed together. These initial weeks of parenthood have been both demanding and immensely fulfilling. Ella is wonderful, and watching her with Stephen deepens my love for him every day. We might not have the lavish items my parents want to provide, but what we do have in abundance is love. I want Ella to grow up in a home filled with love and respect, not one overshadowed by judgment and manipulation. She will know that her value is not tied to material wealth or status, but to her character and the choices she makes. Ella will understand the importance of setting boundaries, standing up for herself, and following her own path. This journey has been arduous, but I have no regrets about the decisions we've made. We are now looking forward, focusing on our small family and the bright future that lies ahead.